Welcome to Cars on Call. I am Steve Schutz. I'm here along with co-hosts, trauma surgeon Stefan Moran and Adams Hudson. Stefan, how are you? You're back in Alabama. What are you up to?
Well, I'm actually in Birmingham. It's the mobile studio for me, and I'm in Andrew Clark's office in Birmingham, one of our former guests. And Ellen and I are going to a supper club tonight. So Andrew was kind enough to come and open up his office. I don't have internet at home, so always a mobile studio.
And Adams, you have some light.
I finally do have some light. I've stepped out of the darkness into the light. So here I am. Yeah, I changed locations. My wife's out of town, so I actually got to go to the main part of the house where it's like public and I can act like I actually belong here.
I was seeing that light coming from behind you. It reminds me of the OR. Hey, could you just open your mouth, Adams, to let the light through? We tell the when we're operating with the interns, they'd have the light on the back of the head. I'm like, just open up your mouth so I can get some light into the case here.
Well, my skull could be translucent. I don't know. You might see some things.
Well, we've got a special guest who we'll introduce soon. But we got a few pieces of news, and guys, we talked muscle cars recently, and we did cover I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago that the Dodge Challenger and Dodge Charger were going to be phased out. Well, it seems like it's 1972 all over again, because not only are those two going to be phased out, but they're going out with a bang. There is a Challenger Dodge Demon 170. I'll give you guys some numbers. These are shocking numbers, talking about going out with a bang. 1,025 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 1.66 seconds, a quarter mile in less than 9 seconds on 151 miles an hour. The price tag is going to be $98,261. And anyone who thinks they can buy one for less than $100,000 is nuts. Adams, you are a muscle car expert. Does this make you happy or sad, or both?
Well, I'm going to go with the both part, because we all saw the original performance era, what people would have called the original, the coming and going of the muscle car back in the late 60s to early 70s, and then it kind of went out with a decent bang. Horsepower wars peaked about 1970, as most of us know. But back then, you're talking about a 435 horse Corvette, or rated at that, and a 425 horse Chrysler Hemi, and that was kind of the end of the line. And now we're talking about like the opening ante for anything you call good power now is 500 horsepower. And you see now this Dodge has got twice that, and it's just unbelievable. And I found it. I've never seen a 0 to 60 time start with a 1. I mean, good gosh. And it's a 0.66. I'm sure if they rounded it up to the 3 decimals, it would be a 0.666, befitting of the Demon, which, that car ought to come with a free exorcism. But that we look at this, and Steve, you touched on it. This is really like, you said going out with a bang. This is like a nuclear strike. This is Dodge's ending crescendo. To me, I'm not saying it's ending tomorrow. It'll fade on out. It'll be like we had in the early 70s. It'll be stripe packages and appearance options and things like that. But this is kind of the end of it. And so those of you who think horsepower wars will never end, I would say we're at it.
Well, this thing is so cool. But the Dodge brothers, John Francis and Horace, must be very happy about this, that Dodge is going out just with a monster car. But for a little trivia here, do you know the 1,025 horsepower is only when it runs on an E85? And do you guys know why E85 adds 20% horsepower in internal combustion engine? Two things. One is it has higher octane, and second thing, it cools. So, the enemy of internal combustion engine has always been heat. It's an exothermic reaction burning the gasoline, and the hotter gasoline gets, it doesn't burn as well. The fire is not as evenly distributed. So the ethanol keeps it running cooler. And, that's why they have ethanol injection. And we'll get Geno a little bit later talk about his days in drag racing with the NHRA. But I think this thing is so cool. It's ridiculously fast. And I mean, I would love to have a ride in one of these things. And but I think for any Dodge fan out there, I'm sure Doug Wellborn in Alex City with the Wellborn collection, he's going to have to get one of these in his collection.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. It's absolutely incredible. And one thing I find interesting, Stefan, when we talked about the muscle car era, you made the point that it probably really began with the 1964 Pontiac GTO, and it ended, we all know, pretty abruptly in 1972. That's 8 years. Well, guess what? The Dodge Challenger in its current iteration, which we all know is based on an old E-Class Mercedes, it was launched in 2008. So you're talking 15 years. So we had a better run.
I did forget to mention one thing. The one thing that does make this Dodge go fast are corn subsidies. So it's the ethanol 85, and that is a much better use of high fructose corn syrup than making America fat and diabetic. So I'm really glad.
Amen. Yeah.
So what a great use for it.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to move on, but Gino, can you say anything about this 1,000 horsepower? And by the way, they make the point, just like they did with the Demon, that it was banned by the NHRA, which, as you know, is a gimmick. But
Yeah.
just before we're going to talk to you in depth later, but you must have some thoughts.
I think I'm glad I'm not in product planning at any of the major auto manufacturers these days. It is the most difficult job that maybe I don't know. I'd become a schizophrenic if I was in there trying to decide which way we're going to go, short term, long term, gas powered. We're going to rely on EVs. Oh, we got to do this. We got to do that. We got to hit this price point. I'm just glad I'm not a product planner. I think some of these products that we're seeing come out right now, from Dodge, the Cadillac, the Black Wings they're coming out now. Another fabulous iteration of horsepower and a luxury muscle car to a certain degree. I think it's fabulous. I think these cars are awesome. I think they're not high volume cars. Obviously, they're for a very small targeted audience, and they are incredible cars. I think we're looking. Gosh, Ford just came out recently and had a product announcement about another vehicle that's going to find its end of its line soon. And I look at it with very mixed emotions. Yeah, maybe it's good in one respect, but I still think that people buy cars primarily because of their emotional attachment to that car. It's not an objective decision why they buy a car. Otherwise, everybody would be buying the most vanilla kind of vehicle just to transport them from point A to point B. And manufacturers have to make sure that whatever the power plant, that there's got to be emotion tied to it. There has to be character. There has to be a personality to it. There has to be a reason for me as a consumer to spend a lot of money on a depreciating asset. And that's challenging. It's not going to be easy.
No, I think the personality of this car is a Hell's Angel on crack.
Yeah.
But it's
with a good
amazing.
P&L.
Yeah, and of course, as Stefan alluded to, these are destined to be put away regrettably and not driven. They're going to be collector's items, and I think they're going to end up selling for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 at the end of the line. This is the best one, which is kind of a shame. But moving on, guys, Stefan, you've talked a lot about what you call the Teslafication of the auto industry, and I keep seeing more and more examples. Of course, we've talked about a bunch, but I saw one recently, and this also touches on Geno too, and we'll introduce him soon. But in Alpharetta, Georgia, there is basically a mini Mercedes showroom called RBM of Alpharetta, and basically you don't buy a car there. You go in and you talk to people and you look at a configurator of videos. I think there's actually some driving opportunities as well. But you're supposed to just walk in, no pressure, no salespeople, and just talk about the car. I've been to Alpharetta, Georgia, and there is a Tesla showroom, which is very similar. It's a small thing. There's not a lot of cars. You just talk to people. Stefan, more Teslafication, only now this time it's Mercedes.
I watched the video of this new store, and the choice of words was interesting to me. It said brand ambassadors, a small format experience, lifestyle collection, the MB experience store. And I think it is absolutely the Teslafication of the automotive industry. This next generation, like everything they do, they're going to go straight to their phone. They're going to see what the Yelp review is, whether or not they're going to eat at restaurant A, B, C, or D. It's going to take them 40 minutes, and they're probably going to end up at A. And I think people are buying their cars. Tesla showed that you can sell a car over your phone. Easy. People like it that way. They know what they want. They order it. It shows up at the door. I never, Steve-O and I talked about this on our previous shows. We did not have a good experience at a Mercedes Benz dealership when we thought we were way cool back in our residency. We thought we'd walk in and talk to the guy about the cars, go for a test drive. And they looked at us like, get out of here, you jokers. So I think it's good for the brand. I think it will bring probably more people to a low pressure area. And it's kind of like the experience I had at Polestar at Laguna Beach. Nice, quiet, cool place. Walk in there. They got a couple cars. The guys are all laid back, millennials. And, they show me the computer thing. Then we go out for a drive in a car. And then, if you want the car, you order what you want. I think it's great. It's going to be hard to get people what they want. I think you got to go to a lot and you see an exact car. Like, I'll take that one. It's an emotional experience, but I think they're modifying for the next generation of car buyers. We are the largest generation of baby boomers, but dude, we're on our way out, unfortunately. Not yet, but the next consumers, look at Rolls-Royce. The age group for average purchase for Rolls-Royce, I think I read, is down to something like 40 years old.
It's in the mid 40s,
or 45 for
mid-40s.
the average Rolls-Royce. Who would have guessed that? Goodness, that is the group that's got the money, the .com money.
I thought you were going to say the average age of a Rolls-Royce owner was deceased. I had I'm glad they have a little youthful relevance. It's interesting to see this, and Steph, you should get credit for the Teslafication because that is exactly what's going on here. And I can remember the first time I was in, I think in San Francisco, and of course you see Teslas all over every intersection and every, in the city on the interstate. And we drove into a parking lot and I saw a Tesla dealership. I saw a sign for Tesla and I thought, actually, what is that? I thought it was a Kinko's. It's just not, it wasn't a car lot. I got old think it was not a car lot. It's exactly what you say. It's sort of like I think we can thank Steve Jobs and Apple to a degree for that as well. Going in and custom building a computer, they may or may not have it there. But, Porsche operates largely on a custom order basis, and Ferrari almost exclusively operates on a custom order basis. And when you look at these huge lots, just as a business case, not sadly losing the options on the lot, but as a business case, you see in these big cities, acres and acres, dozens of acres of automobiles lined up door handle to door handle on these huge asphalt lots. And most any dealer will tell you, and I'm sure Geno will confirm this, that the real money is made in the service department. And that, they don't make as much on the front end of the new car. And so they've got all this money spent, all this property tax to pay, all the holding cost and carrying cost of that huge inventory, and all the banknotes out there on unsold vehicles, by the way. I think it almost makes sense as a business case to reduce that to the bare minimum. Who needs 30 silver E-classes sitting out there?
Yeah, amen. We're going to see more of this. And Stefan, you should probably trademark that name because more and more Teslafication.
Elon Musk is the last person I want coming after me.
Hey, maybe you get a free trip to Mars out of it.
So, a one-way ticket.
Yeah, one way. Yeah, he'll take you halfway and drop you off. So anyway, speaking of Teslafication, this is cool. We have a wonderful guest. I'm thrilled to introduce Geno Effler from JDPower. And before Stefan gives his real introduction, let me just say that I met Geno about 15 years ago at Western Automotive Journalists, and we just started talking. And he, at that time, was with Mercedes, and he's done other jobs that I'll talk about since then. But at one point we were talking and I said, hey, I know this trauma surgeon who likes to lecture about car safety. He's actually doing research in car safety. And then Geno and Mercedes invited him out, invited Stefan out for a couple lectures. And I remember I went to one of them. It was very well received. And he did a few of them. So that was really cool. And it was cool to see those two connect. So Stefan, go and introduce our very, very special guest, Geno Effler.
Yeah, I'm super psyched to have Geno on. We had some great times back in the early 2000s. Good to see you again, Geno.
Good to see you, Stefan.
But at the time, I was doing research at University of Alabama at the Mercedes Benz Crash Injury Research Investigating Network, Research and Engineering Network. And we were doing automotive research, and Steve told Geno about me, and Geno gave me a call and said, hey, would you like to come speak at some automotive groups? And I said, absolutely. So the first one we did together was WAJ, which is a Western Automotive Journalist that you mentioned, and I went out there in November of 2002, and Geno we talking with all the different journalists, and I start my presentation, and I'm a couple slides in, and I hear, whoa, that's blood. So poor Geno, I'd forgotten I had a slide that had some blood on it. I can't remember exactly which slide, but Geno turned ashen and pale as the blood came from his body. So from then on, I made sure that I'd either warn Geno to cover his eyes, or I did not use the word blood.
Yeah.
And then the highlight of probably my speaking career, Geno had me speak at the Motor Press Guild in August of 2003. That was fabulous. I met the great Pete Lyons, who did the auto newsletter and sent me pictures. And then we did the Phoenix Area Press Association December 2003. And then I left UAB in 2004. And then 2009, Geno gave me a call and took me to the New York Auto Show, because he was with Volvo at the time. And we did the history of the seatbelt video, which is on YouTube. And I spoke at Motor Trend Radio. So we had a great time spreading the word of automotive research, and I really enjoyed having that platform. So Geno, welcome to Cars on Call, where I still get to speak a little bit about car safety when we have time at the end, but it's been a wonderful time, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Stefan. It's great to be here. I've had a long career in public relations, and those years at Mercedes Benz were a lot of fun. And when I found out that the company was connected to that crash research initiative, I was like, wow, this is fascinating stuff that not only media would like, but obviously their readership. It's important stuff to know. And I still, to this day, quote things that you said in those presentations. And the one that I remember the most, we were talking about airbags and how airbags can help save lives or prevent some injuries. But as you said, the brain in a collision, the brain is still slamming against the skull. So there's an internal injury there that you always have to be conscious of. And that has resonated with me. And I still think about that today when anybody talks about vehicle safety. And so, yeah, it was a great time. It was a great topic to work on. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of great car companies. They weren't great at the time, or one of them wasn't great at the time, but I launched Kia in the US when it was still very, very small. And but it has grown to become a fabulous brand. I spent a number of years at Mercedes Benz, and then Aston Martin, and then a good long time with Volvo doing PR, and then, as you mentioned, a couple of seasons at the NHRA, the National Hot Rod Association, professional drag racing, which was a lot of fun, and and then got hooked up with JDPower, and I oversee all the PR for JD Power from not only the automotive side, but the non-automotive stuff that we're involved in, all the major industries that we monitor, so to speak, with the level of satisfaction for customers, everything from wealth management, banking, insurance, utilities, healthcare, you name it, we're involved in it. So automotive is still probably closest to my heart. And it's great to be here chatting with you guys today. And I'll be happy to jump in and give some perspective on not only some car stuff, but car sales stuff, because we do a lot of monitoring when it comes to car sales, both new and used.
Yeah, I read about JD Power with the car sales part, automotive news and Wall Street Journal in particular, and it's usually your colleague Tyson Jominy who gets all the print. So
Yes, he does.
yeah, I find that interesting. And we're all old enough to remember when JD Power was Dave Power and basically one guy, and he sent out these customer satisfaction surveys, and they became hugely influential. I remember it became a critical part of the automotive landscape in the 1980s. And of course, the narrative became Japan and mostly Toyota, Lexus make the most trouble-free cars, and they retain their value, but they are reliable. And now we've come so far, and I know other industries are involved, Gino, as you'll, I'm sure, talk about. But in the automotive sector, we've really moved past just simple reliability, moved on to other metrics that are so important. Retaining value is one of them. But we're going into a huge change, changing the powertrain and going to BEVs primarily, either hybrids, but we're going to an era where the internal combustion engine is going to say goodbye, sadly for all of us. How does that big change affect you? How does it affect JD Power? How do you think it's going to affect customers?
Well, it's going to affect all of those audiences. It's going to affect manufacturers. It's going to affect JD Power. It's going to affect customers. And it's not going to be a smooth ride. It is going to be incredibly bumpy. And
it already is.
Yeah. Well, it's going to get bumpier. Keep your hands and arms or your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times during this ride is kind of the overarching message. There is no easy path. And I think in many respects, whether it's the government, whether it's the regulators, whether it's the manufacturers, some critics feel that they're pushing too fast, or they're setting deadlines that are too soon, and they're not letting the natural course of the supply and demand or consumer interest drive the marketplace. And it's going to be difficult. We already see now, again, right now EVs account for a very small percentage of new vehicle sales, about maybe 5% in rough terms. The growth of EV sales is dramatically outpacing the growth of public charging units. So that in itself should be somewhat scary to people who are buying EVs or want to buy an EV if the public charging is their option. Not everybody can have a home charger because not everybody lives in a home. They live in apartments. They live in a high rise, and maybe the garage in that high rise doesn't have enough chargers to go around, or whatever the case may be. People are going to have to look for options to charge. And one of our recent studies on public charging stations showed that 25% of the cases, when people went to use a public charging station, it was inoperable.
Wow.
Jack Roush, I've told this quote multiple times again, but when I asked Jack Roush about BEVs, his famous quote, and I've said this multiple times, the last thing you want to be doing is foraging for electricity.
That's right.
And you just very well brought that up once again. And we, my brother gives me a hard time because we beat up on BEVs. No, we're just talking about the reality of the landscape right now of BEVs. I love them. I've driven 2 of them, but they're luxury vehicles for people that can afford to have a home charging station or one at work, but they don't go on road trips and the thing.
Mm-hmm.
You stay within your limits of your mileage. Otherwise, find yourself forging for electricity, getting frustrated, showing up at, I didn't realize 25% of the places don't even work. Geez.
Yeah, it's scary, and it might not work because it could even be the part that you stick your credit card in. That might not be operational. It's not necessarily the charger, but if you can't pay for that charge by having it accept your credit card or your debit card, it won't work. And that's an issue. That's a big issue. So, I don't think gas powered cars are going away soon. They may be in several decades, but it's going to be a long time before we see them go away totally, because, we got to get EVs have to be affordable. The energy costs have to be affordable, commensurate with where gas prices were. And, in order to get everybody to change over and make it worthwhile, because not everybody is in that category, that demographic where they can afford a luxury car. There are people out there who just buy used cars because that's all they can afford. So gas stations are going to be around for quite a while.
Geno, you mentioned that JDPower is moving away, has expanded beyond the auto industry.
Mhm.
Is that market driven, or does JDPower see that perhaps we need to move away because that lion's share is changing with the EV marketplace, or is it just a company getting bigger and taking in more business?
It's the way the company grew. For the first 20 years, from 68 to about 88 or so, the company was just focused on the automotive industry, and the reputation that we developed in terms of research science and being able to interpret consumer data, consumer insights, was applicable. It was transferable basically from an automotive customer to a bank customer, or to a utility customer, or a healthcare, customer, or anything like that. So our what we call our global business intelligence side, the non-automotive side, has really exploded in the last 30 plus years. And we just started 2 years ago an EV practice. So we do a number of EV studies now, and on EV ownership experience, EV home charging, public charging. We do an EV consideration study, which is, to me, the most fascinating part, the most fascinating annual study. And then we also just launched the JDPower EV Index. So every month, and this is a product for OEMs, basically, every month we measure basically the mindset of consumers when it comes to EVs in terms of affordability, adoption, cost of ownership, everything that goes into EVs. So when there's new models coming into the mix, we can take that new data and we put out an EV index score in overall on a 100-point scale. Right now it's about 49, and that scale, or what that EV index is supposed to measure, is where the EV world is in comparison to gas powered vehicles. Right? That's the transition. How close are we with EVs in getting to that point where gas powered vehicles are now, in terms of affordability, in terms of adoption, cost of ownership, the range of vehicles that consumers have to choose from. And it goes up and down. Each of the factors go up and down that make up that overall index, but that index still is kind of just stays around that 48, 49, 50 number. And it's got to have to move a lot before we're at the point where we're going to see a lot more EV sales. And I think it's important for OEMs to know what's going on with the JD Power EV index, because they can see where the pain points are with customers or people who are potential customers, and then how they can address their communications, because that's one of the biggest issues that I think OEMs face, is communicating the pluses or minuses of EV ownership and what it means to own an EV. It's a different step. The first time you buy an EV, it's like, wait a minute, I got to have a charging unit. What is that? Where do I plug that in? Now, what's that going to cost me? What's the utility going to charge me each month? I don't know. I know exactly what I'm paying for when I go get a tank of gas. But, the utility rates, are those going up or down? Time of day I charge. There's a lot of education with consumers. And so we're going to play a part in that, working with those OEMs.
Hey, Gino, how do you think that's evolved? We all are social and we talk to people, and as being car people always ask all of us about cars. And I remember 5 to 10 years ago, it was mostly Tesla people at cocktail parties were talking about how great it was. You never go to a gasoline filling station again. It's fantastic. It's great. But there was never any conversation about the reality. And in advertisements on TV or on the internet, there's no discussion of the negatives. And that is, just a few. The range declines if the weather is cold. And then, of course, you may not be able to find a charger. If you find a charger, it may be a slow charger, so it's 3 hours instead of 30 minutes. These are all things that we've all run into.
Right.
So there's been more of an evolution, and the consumer is being educated either from their friends or cocktail parties or whatever. It's not all great. How much evolution have you seen? And is this something that the smart people know and the average person who doesn't talk cars doesn't really know?
Yeah, there's been some evolution there, Steve. I think one of the key things that we saw early on is that Tesla owners were very much, they were obviously very affluent because those cars are not cheap. And they were incredibly forgiving of cars that typically, comparatively speaking, have poor build quality. That they would overlook those quality issues, say, yeah, oh, that's okay. I still have the coolest car on the block, even if it has orange peel paint, even if the fit and finish is not good, even if, early on, if I had to get a technology update, it would wipe out all the memory that I'd already put into the car. They have since fixed that. Number of issues that they were just very willing to forgive. And so when it came to the quality study like JD Power, they were at the bottom. In the appeal study, basically a study about asking people what they liked about their car, they were at the top. So I think as more manufacturers have more offerings in the EV space, I think there now is more competition. You're seeing much more consideration for those others, shall we say, the legacy manufacturers rather than Tesla. Tesla is still very strong in terms of consideration and appeal, but there are more options, and I think people are going to be shopping a lot more and expecting a lot more. And early on, the people that owned a Tesla, the Tesla wasn't their only car. They had other cars. So if there was an issue with it and Tesla sent the flatbed to come and get the car, they had other cars to drive. As we get into the more affordable, the mass market world, and if Tesla or other manufacturers have EVs, they have a very good service network set up. I think that's a lot more, shall we say, it's deeper than Tesla's service network. And so, Tesla's got, I think they've got some challenges, but they also are still way ahead of the game when it comes to their charging network. You know, they are way above everybody else in terms of their charging network. And that's such a advantage for them. And that's a key selling point for them.
Well,
Because that, like you said, one of the big fears of EVs is range, right? The fear of running out.
Geno, you have been involved in so many facets of the automobile industry, and it's interesting to hear you talk about the specifics and who's moving what blocks of information where. And just even here, it's almost like the Tesla folks were willing to be the beta testers, like we used to consider with software, hardware back in the advent of computers, and even now with the changes of computers. The early phones, the first adopters of the phone just think it's cool because they're the first people with the phone. And on a bigger level, like on a 10,000 foot level, since JDPower is just moving glacial blocks of information back and forth. And like one of those things might have been when NADA, and I know NADA and JDPower have a very close relationship, even recently swapping presidents. But back in maybe 2013 to 15, when NADA was publishing the price guides, I know the then chairman, friend of mine, Forrest McConnell, decided that NADA didn't need to be in the publishing business. And so they got with JDPower and obviously sold that block of information off, and that changed the landscape a bit for NADA and for JD. So now that, like in 2019, JDPower was bought by tech investor Thoma Bravo.
Yep.
And since usually companies are like bought because something's undervalued or there's a hidden asset, or maybe there's a huge coming tsunami of change that either the current owner's not willing to take on, but the new owner would be. What are some things that you've seen change at JDPower since the days of McGraw-Hill?
It's a great question. And I came on board right when McGraw-Hill was selling JDPower to XIO, which was a private equity firm. And the focus on non-automotive has been big because there's a lot more business opportunity, I think, outside of automotive. A lot of investment in AI and becoming a true leader in data and analytics. Not just, we're not a market research company. We may have been 30, 40 years ago, but now it's all about data and analytics and how fast we can get that data and how fast we can analyze it for the businesses that contract with us, so that they can make better products or services. I've seen dramatic changes in our company in the last 7 years. Not only through that change philosophically, but through some mergers and acquisitions. We have acquired a number of companies that are involved in the automotive industry. Zappy Ride, very much involved in the EV world, helping to I'll say in one simple way, we are helping to drill down in various areas where we can tell a used car what exactly is on that used car, what kinds of features and accessories are on that particular used car, so that when a dealer wants to buy it or sell it, or a bank or a lender wants to know how much it's worth, we are at a stage, in very simple terms, we're at a stage where we're helping those transactions go a lot quicker, a lot smoother, and a lot more accurately financially to help everybody save money or make money.
Gotcha. I can speak to that specifically. I swap cars every now and then, and it used to be you'd have to tell a dealer, the person wanting to buy it, exactly the options that were on it, because the VIN number and the coding for that VIN were strictly the domain of the manufacturer. Right. They can decode their own, but nobody else can. Now, all a dealer who's trading in your car, all they want to know is the VIN number. They'll tell you, and sometimes the owner, exactly what was on that car when it was delivered new, and to the penny what it cost new.
That's right. And that's, that's such an advantage. So that's, we are, when we get have a relationship with a manufacturer and they share that VIN information with us, then it can through the software programs that we help support that dealers use, it can help their dealer body. It can help a consumer as well. It's just providing more transparency to the industry, which I think leads to people being a lot more comfortable with the purchase price or the sale price. They have a better relationship with their retailer. And I think that's all good. One other thing I wanted to add, Adams, you mentioned about how dealers, make a lot of their money now on service, the back end, and not so much on the new car sales. That's been true. But up until about 2 years ago, now the leading source of their income is used vehicle sales. What's happened in the
margins are so much
is nutty. I mean,
wow.
there's never been anything like it. And, most people who lease a car, they look at the buyout, and it never used to be very good compared to what, the car's value was after. But now you look at your end lease, and let's say the payments, the buyout's 44,000, and you look at the value of it, and it's like, what, 56,000? So if I buy this car at the end of the lease, I can sell it and make $12,000. It's like, this is wacky. We just haven't seen that in the marketplace, but it's happening, and it's the real Wild West, so to speak. It's a different time.
It's wacky with the deadline. Those days will change.
They probably will, yes.
Yeah.
Well, you said
for the time being, it's not like those used vehicles are gonna just crater. They're not. They're kind of plateauing and maybe coming down a little bit, but they're still higher right now than they were pre-pandemic.
Mhm.
And I think the lease penetration we've seen in the last year has gone from like 23 to 17%. So of all the new vehicle sales, 23% of them, a year or two ago was about 23% of new vehicle sales were leases. Now it's down to 17%. So it's an interesting time in this business.
Yes, it is.
Geno, when you said used cars, I thought you were going to say that their number one new profit source has been attempted subscription services, because I have just beat the shit out of General Motors for their OnStar,
BMW,
Audi, BMW for the heated seats. Did you guys look at that? I mean, the consumers were immediately outraged. Have you guys at JDPower looked at subscription service modeling for these OEMs?
I don't know how much work we've done for them with subscription services. I don't necessarily think so, but I know Tyson Jominy, he's our vice president of data analytics and knows everything there is to know about every data point on new vehicle sales, used vehicle sales, who buys what, where they buy it, all that kind of stuff. He has that data at his fingertips, and he is not a fan of subscription programs because there's so many holes. And like, how do you set a residual value for that vehicle? After a subscription, or how do you set the price? Because that price is usually connected to, let's say, a lease price and incentives. And we're at a stage now where manufacturer incentives are at one of the lowest points ever. I mean, they're so small. He's not necessarily a fan of subscription services. I think because he's a data guy, and there's way too many questions. There's more questions than there are answers from his perspective. So
how do software updates over the air we talked about Teslafication once again, with over the air software updates on cars. I mean, so you're getting a used car that's not updated, but they want to charge you for the update. What do you think the future is for that? I mean, that to me is something,
I think this is just me speaking.
You have a little bit of experience, so I do value your opinion.
I would say, I think that to a certain degree, it's going to take the path of, let's say, recalls. The government is going to get involved. The Department of Transportation is going to get involved in some way, shape, or form. And like a safety recall, the consumer is not required to pay for that recall. The recalls are free. the manufacturer pays for them, and pays the dealer to do that work. I think if there's any kind of a fix like that, an update, I just don't see how manufacturers, I think if it's challenged, manufacturers would lose that there's going to be enough consumer pushback to where all those software updates will be done for free. It's kind of cool. Like, I drive a Cadillac right now, and it's kind of cool when, it tells me that, hey, we have an update. It's only going to take like 2 minutes, make sure your car's outside or whatever it is, and boom. I think that's pretty cool when that happens. But I think
It wouldn't be cool if you had to pay for it.
No, it wouldn't
every
be
time.
cool.
No,
not at all.
But you bring up the point. I think it's going to be come to the forefront as we move into higher tech automatic driver assistance systems.
Yes.
As we move from level 1 to 2, 3, all the way up to autonomous driving, the government needs to be on top of this and in charge of this, and say no, that your car either has it or it doesn't. But once you're in it, they can't charge you for an update, because it is a safety item.
Right.
So it'd be very
That's
interesting
kind of
to
where
see how it goes.
personally, Stefan, that's where I see it going. And
Yeah, so do I.
one of the big issues has always been about, I know historically on recalls, about when you sell a car and it has recalls, outstanding recalls on that vehicle, does that dealer have to perform them before that car can be sold? And right now the answer is no, unless there's a particular emissions recall that's required. They're only required to do the emissions recall, not the safety recall.
Oh, that's crazy.
That is
That makes no
crazy.
sense.
All in favor of that, don't raise your hand. That's horrible. You mentioned earlier, and I thought it was a great phrase when you said you would hate to be in product planning right now. And Lord knows you've been, when you were with the different manufacturers, with Kia, Aston Martin, Volvo, et cetera, you were in a lot of product planning meetings, because you said you would just be schizophrenic. You're talking about a 1,000 horsepower car on one side, and then you've got the environmentalist and the carbon footprint on the other side who are waving the EV flag. When you see this, and you kind of said, you guys you've probably got secondhand schizophrenia from working in the data that you do, because you're still trying to figure out the landscape. So do you see this de-evolution of the ICE cars going? I guess we could call it the end of the ICE age. Do you see that in the coming of EVs, BEVs, as a good thing or a bad thing?
For JDPower, it's going to be a good thing, because everybody is going to be turning to us to help them find answers.
Yeah.
Whether it's the manufacturers or whether it's, I think we've got some interest even from the federal government wanting to know more about the EV index, which can help them figure out and make decisions where to be putting some of these public charging stations, or where to be investing that money to put in the infrastructure sooner rather than later. Where are the places that they need to be first? So I'm hoping that comes to fruition. But yeah, it's from our perspective, I think we're very well positioned to help out these manufacturers and to make the right product planning decisions and the market share decisions, the manufacturing decisions. We can even help determine and supply them with data on where particular kinds of vehicles are going to sell faster. So I think there's a lot of things where we can help, and the same on the consumer side. It's our president of our global automotive division. He's come from some manufacturers and he was the head of manufacturing and product quality at Daimler Chrysler or Stellantis, or whatever but one of those names was at the time. And he's had a lot of experience. a tremendously bright man. And I think he is helping to position us and can talk the manufacturing talk to the OEMs, because that's where the real challenge is going to be when they, making these cars. How many should they plan to make? Where are they going to make them? How easy is it going to be to transition a plant from manufacturing an ICE vehicle to an electric vehicle? The complexity of vehicle manufacturing is unbelievable. It really is. There are thousands of moving parts in a car, and there's not many moving parts in an iPhone. So comparatively speaking, it's much harder to make a vehicle than it is to make an iPhone, I think. And the complexity and the transition and where the consumer's mindset is, the kind of vehicles they want. It's think of the plate spinner on the old Ed Sullivan show. The guy who had the sticks and kept the plate spinning and run around, and that's what manufacturers are doing, trying to keep all those plates spinning.
Well, Geno, I'm gonna put you partly on the spot here as we sort of come around the last lap here. You had mentioned before that you felt like, and I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, that you felt like it might have been a little bit too much too soon for the whole coming advent of EVs versus the public's readiness scale, if however you measure that. And you mentioned the index being in the 4950 range, which I guess just means we're about halfway there for whatever other perspective to kind of dumb it down.
Mm-hmm.
If you could be the czar of all automobile production right now, would you tell them to kind of cool it until the infrastructure and the supply of the core materials for batteries, et cetera, catch up?
Remember the movie The Graduate?
I
The
see
guy,
a
the guy
deflection
kept telling
coming.
Dustin Hoffman.
I do remember that. Yeah.
I've got one word for you, Ben. Plastics.
Plastics.
Right? Well,
Yeah.
my one word, I've got one word for you, Adams. Hybrids.
Oh, okay.
That's where
We're with you.
that's where I think all the manufacturers should really have been going. I mean, and making a strong push to go, "Hey, yeah, okay, everything's going to be a hybrid. We're going to go all hybrid before, and you want to have one or two full EVs or BEVs over here. Okay, great. But hybrids, we just did an event. You kind of referenced it. Co-hosted an event, the Auto Summit at the NADA convention in Dallas a couple months ago. And we had one of the top executives of Toyota on the stage with us. And our Doug Betts, the gentleman I was referring to, our president of global automotive at JDPower, was interviewing him, and he said, they were talking about BEVs and they were talking about hybrids. And the Toyota executive said, look, if I had a handful of, let's say it took a handful of lithium to make one battery electric vehicle, do you know how many hybrids I could make with that same amount of lithium? And the answer was 7.
Wow. Wow.
So they can make 7 hybrids with the same amount of lithium that they could make or put into one EV.
And also basically negate the need for a charging station because you're driving the charging station.
Yes. Yes. So,
I'm with you, Ben.
I'm not an engineer, but I've been around the industry for a while, and I'm an intermediate skier. Let's say maybe I'm not the black diamond skier, but I'm an intermediate guy. And I look at it and I go, why isn't everybody just going hybrids? Hybrid.
I mean, hybrid, the whole point is how do we recuperate the lost energy braking in a vehicle? And BEVs do a good job of that, and hybrids do that where internal combustion engines don't. And I think that's recuperating heat loss in the energy and braking. They don't weigh as much. They're not as dangerous. There's not versus other vehicles when you've got vehicle mismatch and a collision, 8,000 pound BEV versus a 5,000 pound hybrid versus a 4,000 pound ICE car. So from my standpoint, it's just win-win with the hybrids. And I would have no problem owning a hybrid.
Yeah.
Same here.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my 2 cents, and that's about all it's worth. It's 2 cents.
No, your experience.
Yeah, I think it's great advice. It's such a big change, and for most people, I've got a lot of employees in my business, and most of them drive, like an 8-year-old Honda CRV or RAV4 or something, and the average age of the fleet, as you know, in the United States, the average car is 11 years old.
Right.
So to go for this moonshot without intermediate steps, it just does seem like it's a bridge too far, and it's too hard to do just all at once. And I like your word. I didn't expect a reference to The Graduate today, Geno.
I'll not think about that line anyway, but that way from here on out.
There you go.
Hybrids. Yeah, that's perfect.
I was, I just, somebody asked me recently about the popularity of Drive to Survive, the F1 series on Netflix, and how incredibly popular it is. Could you imagine if F1 said, okay, by the end of the decade or by 2035, we're going to transition from, gasoline or fuel methanol powered F1 cars to, all electric F1, right? The E1 series, or whatever they're calling that series that they have. Like, I don't think so. And I don't think race fans are going to go that far. I don't think race fans, they love the sound of an engine.
Yeah, F1 will probably end up being hybrid. They had the capacitors, all these different things, but there will always be a screaming exhaust tone coming out of the back of an F1 car. Now, it may be a 1 liter 4 to 12 cylinder, but it will be screaming like a banshee out the back.
Yes.
And that is part of the automotive landscape, that when you go to a race, you want to smell the fuel, you want to hear it, you want to see it, you want to be emotionally dipped into it. But to have a sterile EV running around whining, like whining like Christian Horner, I just no way.
I just don't see that happening. I mean, the racing may be good, the technology is probably pretty impressive, but as a fan, those cars and those drivers are there to entertain me with their competition. And part of that entertainment, as Stefan said, is the smell, the reverberation, what you feel in the air, and the sound. The sound is unmatched. You take anybody to a race, it could be an F1 race, it could be a drag race. You could take them to a sprint car race for the first time, and the sound of a race car is just, that's the emotional attachment. And if you're just watching cars go around silently or with a little whir, I just don't see people gravitating to that.
Yeah, the Formula E series show that's just people don't come out to watch it.
Yeah.
No, it didn't
full-size
it didn't
slot
work.
cars.
Or it didn't work. And actually, it reminds me of why this new Demon 170 Challenger is going to go for so much money. It's loaded with emotion. So
yes.
Hey, Geno, we're almost we are really out of time. But before we let you go, I'm really curious about one thing, because you've had an amazing career. Let me just start by saying you spent some time in sports, and you're the only person in the automotive industry I know who's got a Super Bowl ring.
Yes, that's true. And not because I was a great
you weren't a tight end?
Tight end or quarterback, none of that. No, I was a PR guy in the NFL for a number of years with the Los Angeles Rams. We went to the Super Bowl, and even though we didn't win back in Super Bowl 14, the little known fact is even the losing team gets a Super Bowl ring. So I have one. I wear it on occasion. I call it my 3.5 quarter ring, because we led after 3.5 quarters, and but we didn't come
would
out
this
on
be
top.
one of those occasions that you have that ring on you that you can dazzle us?
No, sir, I do not. I'm sorry.
Oh,
it's in the
okay.
safe deposit box right now.
But
But,
anyway,
yeah, that was
next visit.
anyway, so sports and automotive and now
Yeah.
JDPower. So when you think about the long arc of your career, which has been so impressive, Gino, what was your favorite part?
Wow.
Seeing my bloody slides at NPT.
That was it.
Yes, yes, not getting sick when he's showing these, human slides of injuries. I'm like, oh, no, please.
I think it was the toes. I think it was a set of 3 toes, maybe.
Oh,
Golly.
look,
No, I
Gino's
think
perspiring.
I'd have to say, Steve, that if there was there's no singular moment or instance or place that I was, but a singular umbrella statement I could make is I've been blessed to meet and interact with incredibly smart, wonderful leaders in their industries, whether it was Pete Rozelle, who was the commissioner of the National Football League when I was there. He's the one who set professional sports on the path that all of them are on now in terms of the TV contracts and revenue sharing. That was Pete Rozelle, the commissioner of the NFL. Some of the owners that I had a chance to meet, the players, spending time with race teams, with Aston Martin at Le Mans, Mercedes Benz, getting to spend time with former Formula One drivers who are contracted with Mercedes Benz, introducing the Maybach brand. Wow, I was so fortunate in that regard, getting to play golf and hang out with the likes of Dan Gurney and Reeves Calloway. It was just like, wow, I'm the luckiest guy on the planet. And here at JDPower, it's been, I got to meet Dave Power once when I was at Kia years and years ago. Super nice man. He died just over a year ago. Very, very nice, big family man, and had great respect for him and the legacy that he set at this company. I've just been so lucky in my life. And, I see people on TV and I go, yeah, I met him. And, I got to work with Vin Scully, Dick Enberg, so many great announcers that we all take for granted or that we listened to for so many years. And I'm just a lucky guy. So.
And now you've been on Cars on Call to
I
peek it all
have.
out.
And
I
one of the
happen to-
hailstones that hit that umbrella is getting to meet me and drag me around. So
Yes. You are also, I don't know if you've talked about this in previous podcasts, but you are the chocolatier unparalleled. You are an expert in defining or helping a low beginner like me identify good chocolate and bad chocolate. So thank you for that, Stefan.
that's right. We just come off that chocolate cruise. Well, Gino, it's been an absolute joy to have you on the show. Lots of great information and wonderful insights. Your experiences is just fabulous in the automotive industry. And we'll have to have you back on again. There's more to talk about. I feel like we ran out of time. We could have gone on for a long time. So hopefully you'll come back.
Sure.
So
Wear the ring.
All right. I'll do that, Adam.
all right. So listeners, like, subscribe, tell your friends. Please have everybody take a listen to our show, and we'll listen to you. We'll talk with you next week.